diet that's going to give your body all that it needs.
Yes. As you start to accelerate your consciousness, you accelerate the energy that your body engages in. If your body has impurities and weaknesses, it was just like when you rebuild your engine. You don't replace your alternators and your water pump, you start going out. I just had the main plumbing on my house redone, the main line out to the street. I went, man, and turned that toilet on and boom! The water pressure now is just up. So eventually I got to do some adjustments to this stuff so it can match the new energy level. Same thing is true. That's why when you dealt with spiritual disciplines, you have to deal with physical exercise, diet. You know, you have to deal with your emotions. You have to get that stuff under control. If you don't get under control, then when you energize, it's going to energize that too. So yeah, that's why really you don't get into it until you got those other things under control. Yes, sir.
I never tried to keep, but I know you got this.
All right.
Maybe years ago when you had Malcolm X and young. This is a question for clarity. When you talk about level of consciousness as it relates to one's elevation in terms of growth and development, and are you making a parallel between what's the revelation when it says you will seek God, He will come with some clouds, in terms of raising your consciousness to be able to see God when He comes, or what you're saying, are you negating what you're saying in Revelation, how God is coming in that space?
No. What I'm actually doing is I would say if God coming in the clouds, I would say then, what is that really saying? Where do clouds exist? Clouds exist in the sky or in the heavens. So within you, where does heaven lie? And heaven is up in your mind, your high, and really your cerebral cortex, in your mind. So it's saying that God will come through you perceiving it in your mind.
So what you're saying is, okay, I'm still about, so I understand what you said, that the heaven would be in your mind, but in terms of your level of consciousness and knowledge and understanding about the last days, since we're in the last days, how does that relate to the fact that they say He would come with clouds? I still don't follow the correlation.
That He would come with clouds.
I
would have to probably read the whole.
Well, I was reading it tonight.
It's not
it's
just
about the destruction.
Right.
The people would see Him, the chosen one, the 144,000 would see Him, and He would come with clouds.
What does 144,000 mean?
The 144,000 represents the revelation of those who will be saved and chosen by God.
When in actuality, the 144,000 represents the 7 seals. It's the number.
Yeah, I'm not going to debate it.
Right.
But no, all we're going to say, we have to get question, the 144,000 represents 12 tribes that have been selected, that will be determined in the last days because of their righteousness to God. Okay, but I'm not going to debate anything else. Now, we're going to debate that.
Sure.
I'm not here for that. I'm just trying to follow your train of thought.
Right. Well, basically, my train of thought would be just that, in terms of essentially it's saying God coming in the clouds. I said that they said that it's just the same thing what the brother was saying, that Christ will return in the sky.
No, what I'm asking is a little bit different.
It's the same thing.
Okay,
It's the same thing.
It can't be the same
Yes,
thing
it is.
because
It ain't but one.
The sky is blue and the clouds are white.
So where does clouds exist?
Okay, we know that. Okay, I don't want to be paid.
Well, yes, you do.
I don't want to.
But it's good. It's all good. It's cool.
I'm just trying to read the point, so I don't have to ask you more questions.
Right.
I ask you some questions later.
Right.
Okay, when we talk about man's understanding and elevation and understanding of consciousness,
right,
relation to knowledge and understanding.
Right.
And the more he learns about himself, the more he becomes aware that his mind represents or could relate to heaven in terms of peace, whatever heaven means to the people. Okay, what I'm asking you, if I have knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, how will I know that God himself exists, and how will I know to see him as something in life?
You see, I'm not debating, I'm just saying when you say, see, I have to go back, and we have to go back and say, how did he find God? When you say, how will you know when you see him? What are you really talking about? See, God, what is God? You know, we, or I say from my school, which the foundation I'm coming from, God really represents the hierarchy of forces or the energies upon which all things come from or made. So then if you're saying to see God is actually for you to see or understand the operation of the universe. Because to have knowledge, wisdom, and first of all, if you had knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, you would see God. Because God is knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. The attributes of God are the attributes that make up knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. But it appears, I'm not true or not, that when you say, how will you know when you see God all around you.
Is it so that I'm looking at God?
Yes, you're looking at God all around you.
Well, when I say that, I'm saying specifically when I look at you, am I looking at God?
You're looking at an aspect of God. God is the whole.
I was trying to maybe add to or clear up a portion of what I think Brother was trying to put out there. Probably because the Bible is taken from the ancient text itself. It's written in symbolism and allegory.
Right.
And so when you're talking about clouds, that is obscure. That God coming in the clouds, that's the confusion and the obscurities that people go through as they're evolving to that highest level. So he'll come through that. God only means force and power. And so we all represent that now. To what degree, that depends on how we evolve. And when you're dealing with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and the spiritual essence, how far we evolve, that determines how big of it or how in depth we are with that God-like force.
Right.
And so I'm saying, going back to try and answer his question is again, it being written in allegory and in symbolism, is when God coming through the clouds, that's the people's confusion. That's the obscurities that the people would have to go through to master themselves and master various parts of the universe. Because when you study yourself, you study God. When you study the universe, you study God.
Right.
When you study, because all of it is connected. When you study the major systems in the body, you study the major systems throughout the universe also, because it's all connected.
Right.
And once you go through that confusion and those obscurities, you are actually you're evolving into that God-like force. And I'm just trying to clear up that one point on the cloud.
Right.
That's just the confusion and the ignorance.
Right.
And the lowest point.
So that's not stolen, but you can't clarify anything to me.
Oh,
When I
excuse me, I
asked
stand
the-
corrected.
Okay, when I asked the question, I wanted to see his understanding and his interpretation of what's being said in Revelation. I have my own interpretation of what the cloud represents.
Oh, okay, I stand corrected, brother. I didn't know you were coming from that angle.
So you can't dictate what I'm going to ask of my interpretation, or his interpretation is trying to get me to understand what you said about my question.
Okay, but I apologize, because I thought you were trying to get some clarity on what clouds were.
You can't speak on something that I already know.
Oh, okay, excuse me. All right. We can drive on, brother.
Okay. So, back to the thing that I was talking about valence, in terms of trying to get you just to understand what that term represents. That each person comes in and they have a certain quality that really represents work or the mission that one comes in with. And so it talks about we are each called forth into incarnation based upon our karmic valence to do service, to satisfy a need of our time. We are cells within the body of humanity, each with a particular function to perform if the body is to be healthy and whole. Our life has meaning, and we must be sensitive to the signatures, the messages from within that give us direction and guidance. The practice of retrospection and meditation are essential tools in the unfoldment of the meaning of our lives. One of the techniques has implied that each evening one should sit down. Just reflect on your day. What did you do during the day? Basically go back, reverse your day and go back through your day to see how you operated in your day in terms of were you controlling yourself, not in control of yourself, and what caused you to get off center if you got off center. So that then you can then come to a understanding and actually forgive yourself for transgression, try to clean the slate. So thusly on the next day, you start off with a clean slate because each day is a new day. And so the same thing, each moment is a new moment. It's all based upon your consciousness. And so retrospection is a process that one uses to constantly realign themselves and learn the lessons of the day. Most people go through their day and don't reflect on what they did. They don't learn the lessons, even if it's positive or negative activities. All of it has positive lessons if one would take the time to retrospect and reflect on it. The second piece is meditation, in terms of however that form that takes, in terms of just quieting oneself and tuning in to their inner divine mind so that they can, I say, get your orders for the day, in one sense. The other is to tune into that energy so as you operate during the day and things are happening, you can be with that but still be in tune with your inner self. And as you can constantly practice, it's like pumping iron or practicing anything, it gets to where it becomes a natural occurrence. You don't have to go into any kind of elaborate technique. You can just be there and we'll be in tune with it. So those are practices that one can do. And they're essential too. Yes.
When you said forgive yourself, what kind of dialogue do you use? I know what the Christian version is.
You really, well, forgiving yourself is really coming to, first of all, what was your motive for doing what you did, number one? Are you aware of what actually triggered the response? So say somebody said something and you went off. Well, why did you go off? The whole point in respect is, retrospection is come to grips with what was in you that allowed you to lose control. Where did that come from?
Just realize that.
And then the second thing is to really come to grips with the act itself in terms of your motive. I mean, if you were really in a hateful mood, you have to regenerate that hatefulness in yourself. So that it doesn't become, it's not just like saying, oh, I won't, it's not just saying I won't do it anymore. You have to really come to grips with why you did it, what triggered it, and alter the thinking that triggered it. So that when you're confronted with that situation again, you don't come from the same place. That's actually forgiving yourself. At the same time, if you did something negative to somebody, you have to, in a sense, try to take that back psychically. Because energy follows thought, and everything is interconnected. So if you did something negative to somebody, you can reverse that. And at least within your own consciousness, to where you put the positive out to try to neutralize the negative. But it only works if it's sincere from the heart. It don't work if it's just a mental exercise. Because it's what's in your heart that's real, not just what you're saying, oh, I'm thinking this way because I want to not have negative things happen. Then you're playing the game. And then that's going to come back on you. Because that's not what's really in your heart. So when you say forgive yourself, it's really going into your heart, really changing or transforming the negative seed that created that truly in your heart. And what happens through then, if it does, it creates growth. The life is basically school, you walk. And even if the next day you don't do it 100%, if you keep reflecting on it and working on it, eventually you'll start transforming if you succeed. What's the number of things that you can do? One is, and what is, well, one is that you can seek assistance or help. But sometimes you just get another person that can articulate or start dealing with it. You see, what will become an obstacle is your conscious mind will start to rationalize. Because it doesn't want to confront whatever it is, or whatever it is, whatever it is. Because to confront it, means you have to go through some kind of change in identity or behave that you're either comfortable with, or you may have anxiety, or you may have to step forward and be, move out your comfort zone. Depends on whatever that thing is. So your conscious mind will create diversion to keep you from confronting that. So then, if part of it is if you know this, then you can wrestle with it. You struggle with it. What you keep doing with it. If you personally can, that's when you can see more professional help, either a spiritual minister, or preacher, or mentor, whoever, or a psychological person, or a friend that's stable, or sometimes you need somebody to talk to that you can trust. Because as you talk it out, you can really hear it. Right. And you can see it. Or you might write. Sometimes it's different techniques. Sit down and write, or ask your question. What's keeping me from really seeing the truth? And see what, it's a process to take. Right? So it's very good. I'll talk about that. So what I really want to get into is two more things. One was to talk about seership. And there's a piece, other thing to talk about understanding. There's a book, Serpent in the Sky. Now we just one piece out of this. Serpent in the Sky, page 47, dealing with the whole concept of number, how the universe or nature is based upon number or energy pattern. So it was dealing with, first it dealt with two. It said two regarded in itself represents a state of primordial or original or principal tension. It is a hypothetical condition of eternally unreconciled opposites. That's two. There's two things that constantly oppose each other. In nature, such a state does not exist. Two is static. In the world of two, nothing can happen because they neutralize each other. Nothing can go forward. I want to go, I don't want to go. You don't want to make up your mind, you just sit there. That's two. So three, which is peace, a relationship must be established between two opposing forces. The establishment of relationship is in itself that third force. One in becoming two becomes three simultaneously. The becoming is the third force, automatically providing the innate and necessary and mysterious reconciling principle. So I go on to say, here we come to an insoluble problem in both language and logic. The logical mind, that's the linear mind, by nature, and the logical mind is polar by nature and cannot accept or comprehend the principle of relationship. That's a logical mind. That's like the left brain, right side. It says, throughout history, scholars, theologians, and mystics have been faced with the problem of explaining the Trinity in discursive language. I'm trying to just Yet the principle of three is easily applied to daily life where, again, according to the nature of the situation, we apply a different name. So male and female is not a relationship. For there to be relationship, there must be love or at least desire. So if you have a male and a female, it doesn't create a relationship. If you
have to have something between the two of them that creates a relationship. So if you have a male and a female, a man and a woman, nothing will happen unless a relationship between the two of them is created. That can be anger, it can be desire, it can be, whatever. So that's the point of moving toward this relationship of the third force represents. It says, a sculptor and a block of wood will not produce a statue. A sculptor must have inspiration. You got to move by see something that can happen with the block. Moving. Sodium and chlorine is not in itself enough to produce a chemical reaction. There must be an affinity. Even the rationalist, the determinist, pay unwitting homage to the principle, unable to account for the physical world through genetic environment he calls interaction, which is a label applied to a mystery. What is an interaction? Right. Logic and reason are faculties for discerning, distinguishing, discriminating. Note the Greek prefix "die" meaning two. So discrimination, discernment, means dividing something, separating. Both logic and reason will not account for everyday experience, because even logicians fall in love. The third force cannot be known by the rational faculty. Hence the aura of mystery hovering about every one of its innumerable aspects: love, desire, affinity, attraction, inspiration. The key it says here, it says, the heart, not the head, understands three. By heart, I mean the complex of human emotional faculties. Understanding is emotional more than an intellectual function, and it is practically a synonym for reconciliation, for relationship. So understanding is a synonym for reconciliation and understanding. So understanding is reconciliation and also relationship. The more one understands, the more he or she is able to reconcile and relate. Keep this in mind, it's very important. The more one understands, the more one reconciles seeming incongruity and inconsistency. It is possible to know a great deal and understand very little. So while we cannot measure or know three directly, we experience it everywhere. From common, everyday experience, we can project and recognize the metaphysical role of three. We can see why trinities are universal to the mythologies of the world. Three is the Word, the Holy Ghost, the absolute conscious of itself. Three is the Word, the Holy Ghost, the absolute conscious of itself. Man does not directly experience the absolute, or unity, or the primordial vision which caused creation. That means you do not directly experience it. But the famous mystical experience, union with God, is the direct experience of that aspect of the absolute that is consciousness. Because a part of the absolute is pure power. You cannot experience pure power. Because to unite with pure power is to become power, and there's no experience now. Only the aspect of the absolute, a part of it is consciousness. Because when one says, I am filled with the Holy Ghost, to be able even to say that means that you have to be conscious that you are in the state of this divine unity with the spiritual absolute. Which means then you are in a state of consciousness. So it says through, it says, the degree to which one understands three is a fair indication of the degree to which he or she is civilized. To acknowledge the third force is to assent to the fundamental mystery of creation. At the same time is a recognition of the fundamental need to reconcile opposites. The man who understands three is not easily seduced into dogmatism. He or she knows that true and false in our world are relative, or if seemingly absolute, as in certain logical systems, then that system itself is but relative and taken from or abstracted from a greater, more complex reality. The failure to understand this results in the curious modern reasoning that declares the part valid but the whole is illusion. In the West, they say that the part is valid, but then the whole is not. Which is now, how can a so-called human being who say they believe in the Creator then say that it hates an aspect of the Creator? But it's this theological reasoning that enables them to rationalize this in their own mind. So you have someone who says they are for, but they're for life, not pro-choice, people who are against abortion. You see, they're against abortion because you're destroying life. But they'll go turn around and kill somebody. That's an absurdity. But it's this reasoning where they're looking at life as opposites. Illusion. And so we came into this talking about one's mission and also the faculty for seership. As you develop higher capacity, you have to be able to operate at a higher level of consciousness, which then is able to see the seemingly contradictions, or really not contradictions, at a higher level. Because all that exists within the framework of the universe. So the key is what's your reference point. So when these people are talking about pro-life, or they're talking about, even the ones talking about this whole religious stuff, right? They see themselves as being separate from the whole. So as they see themselves as being separate from the whole, they say they have legitimate rights based upon some divine right. They have a divine right because they're humans and all this. But yet these other humans don't also have divine rights. And so that state of consciousness creates a barrier for going to a higher level of understanding. People got to a higher level of understanding. You can't get to a higher level of understanding because thinking actually creates the limitations for you to do that. That's now. Now I want to talk about right. 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 Yes.
How do you know when you reach the next stage of the next phase of this level of consciousness? Say it's the 7 steps to
Right.
certain number, the 7 steps to the number of steps.
Right.
How do you know when you reach the 7th step?
Because each step has corresponding characteristics to that step. Each step has qualities that represent that level of consciousness. So then if in your life you are not reflecting those qualities in your life, not operating at that level of consciousness.
Who makes that determination?
You should. That's why all the great orders have been here. And they outline what those qualities are.
So you said that our ancestors make that determination for us in this life. What level of consciousness is determined by the quality or understanding that you might have about this determination?
Great teachers, sages, initiates before us who have walked that path have defined and reflected what those qualities have been. So one way is to then study and understand those teachings. But the other way is that by you walking that path yourself, you will start to exemplify those qualities. And you will know. It's just like, how do you know that you're water? Because you're in it.
So in other words, what you're saying is, if you follow the examples that's given throughout the Holy Bible about how you become godlike, then all you have to do is just practice those principles of righteousness to become godlike.
Yes, if you understand the inner teaching of the Bible.
Who determines the inner teaching?
Those you need to basically where we're coming from, or where I'm coming from, is that the Bible came out of a mystery tradition, it's a universal tradition. All your great teachers were actually initiates of the ancient wisdom. Those ancient wisdom has a process that's been defined. They all went through it. And so then the Bible, they actually document that process in allegorical or symbolic form. So one of the things we've done here is read Stolen Legacy. Get into Stolen Legacy, we understand what it's talking about. Then there are reference books that also are defining what those stages and conditions are. There's a book, Science of Becoming Oneself, Science of Meditation. It's talking about those different levels of consciousness. Study of the ancient traditions on the Tao, study the ancient traditions on the various of yoga. They have documented various levels of consciousness from the lowest physical level to the divine level, and the various attributes and characteristics that operate on those levels.
So that would be the origin of what you're talking about. But in terms of, here's my last question, in terms of time, okay, you saying that our great aspect was determine how we can identify what level of consciousness based on how our understanding of what they wrote. Okay, I'm still,
Not just what they wrote.
Okay, I'm still a little confused because a man that lived a million years ago has determined what level of consciousness I reached based upon what he wrote and passed on through other philosophers.
No, what he did is back to this. We as human beings are on a journey. We're on an evolutionary journey. In each age, in each time, there are those that tune in to the universal, to the divine. And in that tuning into that universal and divine, they articulate the knowledge and insight that they gain from that. There's an unbroken linkage between the ancient masters of wisdom that articulated that. That tradition is a universal tradition. The experiences that they experienced a million years ago will be the same experience that you experience when you tune in to the universal, because the universal is the same. The only thing that has changed is the illusion of the physical. And so they have handed down the lessons and insight that were gained through these divine states of consciousness.
one other question. So you're saying when they had a divine experience,
Right.
okay, millions of years ago, and I had a divine experience yesterday, one and the same
Yes.
in terms of consciousness?
Yes. That takes me right to this. This is Gerald Matthew's lecture, and the piece I'm reading from Manuscript of the Soul during 50,000 Years of How We Found It. And in that, page 7 of the article, it talks about abnormal seership. It says, when we ransack the myths of the world and the legends of the earliest races, we can find no such thing anywhere as a beginning with abstract conceptions. He's stating that when you look at the original myths, the original legends, they weren't based upon abstract concepts. But there is absolute proof everywhere that man founded at first upon his observation of objective phenomena. It was a direct experience of the divine. Primitive man was not a theorist or a dealer in ideal notions, not the kind of man to whom ideas are realities. Like now, people come up with an idea and think the ideas are reality. Like when people got these ideas, they're absurdities because they're living in their mind. They think it's true. It's like they talk about the Bill of Rights, the Constitution. They can articulate all these high ideals, turn right back around and have slaves and utilize people. So they're living in their mind. They're not living in reality. The traditional people live in reality. It says, the kind of man to whom I deal with a stubborn positiveness, limited, holding on hard and fast to the hard rock of his facts, based upon facts. Of metaphysics is altogether a later product. All these confusions, they say, is a later product. My contention is that the invisible world first demonstrated its existence to the early dwellers of the human mind by becoming visible to them. It did not dawn on them from any sudden illumination within, nor awaken to consciousness as a memory of immortality. Conception did not precede the act of begettal. Conception did not precede the act of begettal. That means that the baby did not come before the impregnation. The conception is a product of the act of impregnation. That's the impregnation conception, right? So, in essence, what he talks about is the actuality preceded typology. Fact precedes type. So he's talking about Christ and how now they're looking at Christ and they put it into a type. So now people think the type is the reality. When the type is actually talking about an actual occurrence or fact. That's why people look outside themselves for the Christ, as opposed to the process you go through to become Christ. So it says, the pretensions and impostures of modern theology have tended to make these simple naturalists of the past look like impostors, although they were not. At least they are not in the eyes of those who are acquainted with the abnormal phenomena occurring in our own time, which enables us to understand the same phenomena as a factor of knowledge and religion in the past. I say the knowledge, for in his way, prehistoric man was a Gnostic, and the Gnostics founded their religion from the first upon knowledge. By means of knowledge, they attained their truth. It appeared at first sight as if the ancients, having identified the intelligence or nous in man thought it could be fed forever by the knowledge accumulated in this life. That means you can feed the intelligence in you by the knowledge you accumulate in this life. The esoteric Buddhist still expects a perpetuity of existence by means of knowledge, or the gnosis. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the deceased makes his way from stage to stage of his progress by what he knows. He asserts his right of way by proclaiming, I am one who knows. I am the Gnostic. I have come, he explains, having the right to prove. Certain papyri assure a passage, and prevailing by his papyrus, like Christians with his roll, is a title of the deceased. If he knows the first chapter of a ritual in this life, the spirit of the deceased can come forth every day as he wishes and not be turned back. If he possesses the knowledge of facts which were demonstrated by the ancient spiritualists, he is shown in the process of creating his eternal soul by means of the gnosis, or the books of knowledge, those of past Hermes. He cries, let me come, let me spiritualize myself, let me make myself into a soul, prevail and prepare myself by the writings of Hermes, or the gnosis. The immortal nature of the soul having been demonstrated in the mysteries, a knowledge of these mysteries was sufficient to ensure a safe passage through the dark of death, and ensure triumph over all opposing powers to those who had not vision. By means of wisdom, says the wise man in the Apocrypha, I shall attain immortality, and to be alive into wisdom is immortality. To know was salvation. Acquiring this wisdom is described in Revelation as eating a little book on purpose to be in the Spirit, to be born again in the Spirit or in Christ, as Paul has it, or to prophecy, or to know how to entrance or enter the spirit world as a spirit, for that is the ultimate fact. Irenaeus says of the Gnostics, they affirm that the inner and spiritual man is redeemed by means of knowledge, and that they, having acquired the knowledge of all things, stand in need of nothing else. For this is the true redemption. Hence they repudiated the Christian salvation by faith. The souls which possess the saving seed of wisdom were considered superior to all others, and the Gnostics held these to be the souls of prophets, kings, and the priests, who were consequently endowed with a nature loftily transcendent. They maintained that those who attain to the perfect knowledge must of necessity be regenerated into that power which is above all. For it is otherwise impossible to find entrance into the aroma, or into the ultimate. In our day, such persons are sometimes called mediums or sensitives. In India, they are depths in the most hidden mysteries. But this gnosis by which the deceased in the ritual prevailed over the destroyers of form, the extinguishers of breath, the eclipsers of the astral shade, or the stealers of memory, for these are among the devourers of name. This gnosis of redemption and salvation, the gnosis of enduring life, was not merely information or knowledge in our modern sense. It was the gnosis of the mystery and all that was therein represented. The ancient wisdom, unlike the modern, included a knowledge of the trance condition, from which was derived the Egyptian doctrine of spiritual transformation. This passed on into the Christian doctrine of conversation, of conversion, and then the fundamental facts were lost sight of, or cast out in judgment. The adepts had learned how to transform themselves into spirits and enter the spirit world as spirits among spirits, or as was sometimes said in the totemic transformation, to enter the body of beast, the survival of which we have in the world. We talk about negative. We were talking about entering into the divine state and having spiritual sight. Hermes described the abnormal or trance condition as a divine silence, and the breath of all, and the breath are the essence of all the senses, which means you shut down your external senses and tune in to your internal senses. That's why in the practice of meditation, one quiets the external noise. To quiet the external noise, one can hear the voice of the soul inside. He says, I loosen the soul from the bodily senses and emotions. It draweth it from the body and changes it wholly into the essence of a God. Then says Hermes, the soul cometh to the eighth nature. Having its proper power, it can converse or enter into spiritual intercourse with the powers that are above the eighth nature. So nirvana becomes a present possession to the esoteric Buddha, because in trance he can enter the eternal state. This gnosis includes that mystery of transformation, which was the change spoken of by Paul when he exclaimed, Behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not entirely sleep. We shall be transformed according to the mystery that was revealed to him in the state of trance. This was the transformation which finally established the existence of the spiritual entity. Religious mysteries. Yes. It means that you go into transform yourself from being focused and locked into the physical, and you transform yourself into the spiritual. That you withdraw your energy from its functioning within the physical, which means the physical, the emotional, and the lower mental. You withdraw the energy out of that, which then redirects it into your intuitive and spiritual self, which is a transformation. You become transformed because you no longer see the physical world. You start then being able to see the spiritual world.
So I have understanding what you're saying. When you say the spiritual world, what world are you referring to?
I'm referring to the physical world is a outgrowth and a reflection of the spiritual or inner world. What we see as the physical world is actually an illusion, because if you have spiritual sight, what you see here will not be the same form. You will see different, first of all, based upon certain limited experience and also a lot of study. The spiritual world is a world of energies that the energies are interconnected in different forms than you see here. Here you see me as this physical thing. If you had spiritual sight, you would see me as a radiant human body. You could actually read me based upon the various energy pulsations and various colors that will be emanating off of me, because the universe is made of light.
So in other words, so if we're the same level of understanding, then when I see around you, it's like an aqua,
Aura,
aura, you call it aqua aura. So that's what I'm supposed to see from at a level in terms of spiritual concept.
Spiritual sight.
What's the spiritual sight of spiritual concept?
Spiritual consciousness is actually where you can reach spiritual consciousness in different ways. That's the next piece that I would talk about is the different ways. So since you brought it up, I'll read on that. You have capacity to enter into spiritual consciousness, discipline yourself through physical exercise and meditation. One format. Create a method for you to unite spiritual level. You can practice what they call the art of devotion, where your life becomes dedicated to love. Your whole life is dedicated to operating on the foundation of love, because the nature of love is the nature of the divine. If you can consistently operate on that level over time, and eventually merge with this, then be able to unite with the absolute. You can also operate from a level of total service to humanity or the whole, where everything you do is in what we call karma yoga, which is actually really pure service to the whole. And after a consistent, dedicated period of time, really based upon your own level of discipline, etc., you can then merge with that energy and experience the absolute. You can merge with the absolute through what they call the way of the intellect or the way of knowledge. You can so occupy your thoughts and energy with higher philosophical concepts and ideas to eventually all those philosophical ideas and concepts merge together and take you into unified being, which then changes, puts you over into the intuitive, because it's like all that stuff synthesized. Now you operate from the synthesized and you merge with the absolute. Then there's also other forms like there's also tantric, where you can actually use various disciplines, channel the actual creative central energy to the dangerous path. You actually can also activate the power of the consciousness. What I'm saying is the difference between spiritual consciousness and abnormal seership is that abnormal seership is actually a psychic, clairvoyant capacity. Spiritual consciousness is where one operates at the level of spiritual. Usually they go hand in hand, but not necessarily. You can have spiritual consciousness without spiritual sight.
So, what would be the difference between spirituality versus the divine experience in terms of sight?
Divine experience would be where you actually, for a brief moment in time, your consciousness is connected to the divine aspect of experience.
So what
Spirituality is when that you can come back out of that. It's a memory, but you don't necessarily operate in your daily life from spirituality.
what about divinity?
Actual divinity is you train to go beyond spirituality.
Okay, so
You actually
okay,
merge.
I'm asking you another question. So you can operate on a spiritual level on a day-to-day basis, right?
Yes.
Can you operate on a day-to-day basis on the level of divinity?
Yes, it's possible. So, Prudence dealt with the insight that the insight necessary for the actualization of vision. I was talking about the seership. And so true gnosis or the true knowledge is just not book knowledge.
the actual masters or prophets actually had activated the spiritual cycle. They can actually see the operation of the universe. They would take the veil away, pull the veil away, and actually pull the veil away, and see the operation. That's where we put our carpet out of the flower. And guys into the divine spiritual creation. Nature, and then he actually could bring questions to his mind, and that and unite with the energy of the flower, and that flower would then communicate back to his consciousness answers to situations propagated by the flower. Because he been united with nature of the mind, and core knowledge of the system. Prudence also talks about caution or forethought. Because one has to move cautiously when one starts to engage this kind of energy. Because if one does not move cautiously, one can start to activate the energy. If one is not properly prepared, one can now actually do self-destruction, become obsessed, to have illusions. Things can happen to the physical level, things can happen to the emotional level. A lot of people get involved in drugs, actually open up the state of consciousness, do not have a foundation to relate to the experience. Other things that magnification involved in time. Some of it stuff. So, one is the other doesn't have a vision. As far as like tune in to that voice of science, hear only stuff. The other one is in like developing the virtues, you also develop insight that fit or provide the foundation to eventually can open up the veil and develop seership, which is the true intelligence, the true life. Next, we're going to talk about the session, third and last session. I will go all the two.
Read from Gerald Massey's.
It's Gerald Massey's lectures. He has a whole series of essays. Good piece. Historical Jesus and the biblical Christ. Historical Jesus, the Jewish, the biblical Christ. Okay. Seven souls of man and the culmination of Christ. Coming religion. I read the man searching the soul without pound. Page 46. Deal with the page number. Chapter 59. I give out books. I give out books every session. I have them with me. So I give out the name, the title of the book. Oh,